After spending 2 weeks in quarantine hibernation, the Prime Minister Scott Morrison emerged from the lodge, refreshed and raring to go.
Important that we do these things.
Walking straight into National Cabinet.
Today was an important meeting of the National Cabinet.
With bad news for 34,000 Aussies stuck overseas, Premier's agreeing to halve the number of international arrivals.
It's about the Delta variant. It's simple.
But good news for the bungled vaccine rollout. The PM unveiling the new 4-phase path out of the pandemic. Phase 1, vaccination.
Vaccinate, prepare and pilot.
This is where we currently stand and have been since the beginning of the year, trying to get as many vaccines in arms as possible.
We believe we'll be in a position by the end of this year to have offered everyone a vaccine that seeks to have one.
Why does that sound so familiar?
We're on track to complete this vaccination program for Australians by the end of October.
The government's working off
the scientific modelling
that'll determine the vaccination threshold that means we can move from phase 1 to phase 2. But the PM was light on modelling details.
It'll be based on that scientific evidence that will say to me as Prime Minister that when you hit that mark, we have a high level of confidence that you can move into this next phase.
Phase 2, post-vaccination. Our nation has hit that science number of jabs, moving away from lockdowns and through the gate.
That's the gate that we have to get through. Once we get through that gate, we seek to minimise serious illness, hospitalisation and fatality as a result of COVID-19.
So basically where the UK and US are at.
But I note in the UK, they're only slightly above 60% on their double dose vaccinations now.
A bit better than our 6.71% fully vaxxed, not to mention the UK has almost triple our population. Moving on. Phase 3, consolidation. Will see us treating COVID like the seasonal flu.
No lockdowns, the vaccine booster program underway, exempting vaccinated residents from all domestic restrictions, abolishing caps on returning vaccinated travellers.
And by phase 4, we'll be back to sipping bintangs on the beach in Bali.
We've made it very clear today what's on the other side.
Oh, freedom! But with around 16 million Australians still waiting for PFIZER vaccines, just how long will it take to get to the other side?
What matters at the end of the day is you get the job done.
Finance Minister Simon Birmingham joins us now. Minister, what percentage of the population need to be vaccinated before we can get to phase 2?
Thanks, Peter. Well, that's work that we're going to be working through, particularly with the experts at the Doherty Institute, as well as the rest of Australia's medical experts that have guided us so successfully in saving Australian lives through the pandemic. It's work that's having to be updated in light of the impacts of the Delta variant and the faster transmission we're seeing there. But it's underway.
Minister, I can understand some updating, but surely 18 months into this pandemic, we've got some idea now. Most estimates are somewhere around 70 or 80% as the benchmark. Can't we get some sort of an idea?
Well, Peter, I think it's fair to say that indeed most people will talk in those sorts of ranges, but in terms of putting precise figures on it as target points, that's where we're going to work with those medical experts. Now, importantly, we want all Australians to have the chance to be vaccinated as well as part of this process, and that's where we're really pleased to see the fact that we've recorded yet another day of record vaccinations, and we've got to the point of now 8 million doses having been administered in Australia, and as long as we see supplies continuing to come in as forecast, well then we know even on the current rate of vaccination we'll hit 70% of the Australian population by year's end, and indeed with the extra supplies
really
anticipated.
Do that, Simon Birmingham? I mean, we're only at, 8.5%, less than 8.5% having had both jabs up till now, and there's all this talk about phase 2, 3 and 4. That's a bit like me saying I want to play rugby league for Australia. I've just got to learn how to play rugby league and then we can move on to the rest of it. We're so far off actually ever getting there.
Peter, 70% of over 70s have had at least one dose. 50% of over 50s have had at least one dose. 30% of all Australians who are eligible, everyone over 16, has had at least one dose. So we're going to see that double dose number climb really quite quickly as all of those Australians have already had the first dose get their second jab. But importantly, we start to move further into the Australian population.
What was the point today of today's announcement? You didn't actually announce the only thing that people want to know.
I think people did want to know and do want to be reassured that the work is underway and to understand the different steps, that it's not going to be a single rip the Band-Aid off moment where we say, mission accomplished, all done, borders open. It is going to be a staged and careful approach, built on the health advice, where we work through those different elements the PM outlined in terms of piloting first and foremost, how we might bring vaccinated people into Australia under different models that still maintain safety, and then stepping through the different gradual phases before we get to a return to normality.
Minister, yesterday you admitted that Australia is at the back of the queue when it comes to the PFIZER vaccine. Last year, the PM assured us that we were at the front of the queue. So what happened?
Well, indeed, we were at the front of the queue in terms of vaccines that we're planning to make in Australia, and that's what we did with AstraZeneca. You know, at that point, we made sure that we had the technology brought to Australia, upgraded the manufacturing capability, and in doing so, produced a vaccine that was going to be able to produce 1 million doses a week for our country. Now, unfortunately, the health advice changed, and that's why we had redundancy measures in place, so those second options, such as Pfizer, and in fact, we contracted for 195 million doses of vaccines overall. So indeed, when the health advice changed on AstraZeneca, when expected doses of Pfizer didn't turn up from Europe, we had fallback positions, and that's now what we're seeing come into effect, and it's why we've vaccinated 1 million doses just in the last 8 days.
I do respect that. The Prime Minister says that anybody who wants to get a vaccine can, or it will be available to them by the end of the year. You're saying that we're at the back of the queue when it comes to Pfizer. The rollout hasn't gone according to plan so far. The Australian people, I imagine, want to believe what you're saying, but why should they?
Because we've done 1 million doses in the last 8 days, and because we have seen a step up in delivery of Pfizer. And so indeed, that growth in the vaccine strategy is working and delivering. It's why we've got to 8 million doses. Indeed, it did take around 47 days to get the first 1 million doses, but it's only taken 8 days to deliver the last million of those 8 million doses across Australia. And if we maintain just the rate we're doing at present for the rest of the year, then that gets to 70% of Australians. But we expect there to be more doses available and for that rate to be able to increase in terms of supply increasing. And we're bringing an extra 1,300 GPs online as distribution points. We'll be opening up during the year to more pharmacies as distribution points. So Australians will see more vaccine coming to the country, more places to get vaccinated, and that should give them the confidence that they will see the vaccine option for all Australians achieved.
Minister, we're out of time, but if you had your time again, I know hindsight's easy, would you do it differently?
Sure, Peter. I think we would have said that there were lots of uncertainties. I mean, clearly, if we had known that doses weren't going to turn up, 3.4 million from Europe, if we'd known the health advice on AstraZeneca was going to change, well, you would have done things differently. I'm big enough to admit that. But you can't foresee those things, and anybody who pretends you can is really misleading, I think. We invested to try to make sure Australia had sovereign manufacturing capability of a vaccine here in our country, and we have, but it's not a vaccine that is recommended for everybody all of the time, and that's why we've had to make sure we had the other options in place. Those options are there. They're coming to Australia now, and Australians should have confidence for the future that there's a plan to get them vaccinated and the different phases of the plan to open again and give them their freedoms in terms of within Australia and ultimately moving in and out of Australia.
Minister Simon Birmingham, thanks so much for speaking with us tonight.
Thanks, guys. My pleasure.
With so much content online, it's sometimes hard to keep up with it all. And let's face it, who has the time? The Project YouTube has you covered with the stories that matter. Hit subscribe for a daily list of the news that you need to know.